Hello there. My name is Jasom Jensai, and welcome to this stream where we're going to be going over episode 1. I'm going to be reviewing that, sharing my thoughts about that entire episode, talking about how powerful are the Dark Troopers from The Mandalorian, um, and what is my favorite hallway scene, and hopefully yours if you chat in during the show. I'll spotlight your thoughts because no one else is going to be chatting, so I'll definitely be able to read yours. So if you're watching after the stream and you're like, oh, when is this gonna be next time so I can tune in? It's a Saturday night, 7 o'clock for me, but it could be completely different for you. Um, so just Saturday nights pretty much. But before we get to all of that, the question of the stream for today is who is the viceroy of the Trade Federation? Um, it's a pretty simple question. Like, if you know, you know. So just leave that in the chat, leave it in the comments. Whoever gets it correctly first without looking it up, and you only get one guess, by the way. Whoever gets it correct first gets 10 points. And I am keeping score, so the only criteria is you have to comment it or chat it, or I guess you could email it to me too. That would be fine as well. But some written form of verification, and then I'll write down the 10 points. So that's the question of the stream. Who is the viceroy of the Trade Federation? Let's get on with the rest of the content. So, episode 1 is often seen as a really good episode. It's often seen as a really bad episode. For a lot of people, it's probably more in the middle, but it is a very divisive episode. So when it first came out, people, you know what? I don't even know. I wasn't there. So I'm just going to say people loved it and hated it probably, but I can't tell. I know that I really enjoyed this episode. I remember episode 1 when I was a young kid and how important it was to me. And yes, Jar Jar is funny, at least to me as a kid. He still is a bit now, but not quite as much. So overall, my thoughts on it are really good because I grew up with it. I have nostalgia towards it. I'm obviously going to be biased, but that doesn't mean that it's a faulty opinion. It's just there's a reason I have this opinion. So, with that out of the way, let's just go through it start to finish and talk about all the awesome stuff in it and even the bad stuff too. So the title crawl isn't quite as good as say episode 4. That one has a good title crawl, but it's not too bad. It mentions like the taxation of trade routes and that kind of stuff, but like if you don't know, it doesn't really matter that much to the story. You kind of understand, oh, there's a dispute. Oh, the greedy trade federation is attacking Naboo, and all the important stuff is there, even if you don't understand the political side of it. And it's a good explanation for those who do know the political side of that. They're like, oh, that makes sense. We're here in the story, and it just explains a lot. But then you see that ship go in, and nothing super significant or cool happens other than I'd say the introduction of Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon is cool, just because I like them as characters. You get to see Obi-Wan as a young kid, which for many people was like probably a big thing, considering Obi-Wan was a character from the original trilogy who they only saw as old and now he's young. So that must have been a big thing, but can't relate. I've always seen him as just Obi-Wan in all of his versions. So Obi-Wan shows up, Qui-Gon shows up, they're talking about the living force and the cosmic force, which they're not talking too extensively about it, so there's not much there, at least I don't see much there in that little scene, but there is some. They kind of introduce the idea. But then they get attacked by the Trade Federation, and also you get to see Sidious order the attack, which is cool. You get to see Darth Sidious controlling from the shadows like always. Kind of shadows. He's technically glowing, but he's got a cowl on, so he's hiding his face. So yeah, they get attacked. It's a cool scene. Epic music. That's like some of the coolest. Yeah. Paying attention to the music for just a second in The Phantom Menace specifically is super good. Like, The Duel of the Fates, obviously, everyone points out Duel of the Fates. Oh, it's such a good soundtrack. Um, but even just outside of Duel of the Fates, so much good music came from the Phantom Menace, and it's used very well in this episode. Um, One scene that pops out to me for how they use the music super well is in the pod race. It's down to just Anakin and Sabalba, and then his pod race starts to fall apart, and you hear this like the music start to come in, and it had been absent during the entire pod race, which isn't much of a problem. I mean, with between all the engine sounds and the just sand flying past as the pod racers go by, it's a very intense. You're not like why don't they have music at this part? It's pretty intense, anyways. But then they add the music, and it's this super like exciting, just thrilling. It really puts you in the mood to watch the climax of this awesome pod race. Um, but anyways, going back to the beginning, Obi-Wan has that the negotiations were short quip that I always love. Um, so well said, so well delivered, and just a good line of dialogue, by the way. Everyone thinks George Lucas can't make dialogue, but I don't know. Sometimes he's brilliant at it. There's so many lines that just get quoted all the time, and yet people say he's bad at dialogue. And sure, there are also lines that just fall flat. Um, Everyone points out, I don't like sand. I don't like that. I actually like that line. It's pretty clever. Kind of not that clever, but it gets the point across of who Anakin is and how he feels about, sand. So, anyways, yeah, the negotiations were short. Great line. But other than that, it's a pretty cool but not groundbreaking opening. Then they go down to the planet. They save Jar Jar, and that's where about 50% of people, it seems, go like, and I'm out of here. But I don't mind it. Honestly, Jar Jar is very important to this story, not just in universe, but also for the fans. But he's also not that bad if you don't like him. You can just mostly just ignore him. So as a kid, I really loved Jar Jar. Like pretty much everything he did, I liked. I didn't notice things like him stepping in poop or anything, but like when he got his like foot tangled around the battle droid and started hopping around, and he even took out a destroyer droid, which is very impressive. Or when he like is screaming in that like in the bongo, I think they call it. It's the submarine thing, and he's like screaming around. He's like, we're gonna die. It's pretty cool. And as a kid, I thought he was hilarious and relatable. Um, and he's like, I don't know. And boom, I ended up here. It's just a very funny character at the time. And now that I'm older, I'm like, well, he's not really that funny. In fact, sometimes he's kind of annoying. Look at those poop scenes where he's smelling poop and stepping in poop. But honestly, you can probably just ignore him mostly, and it doesn't really detract that much from the movie. At least it doesn't for me. And maybe that's just because I'm used to it, but I don't know. I feel like Jar Jar is not as annoying as people think, or as people portray him as. But at the same time, a lot of people are like, "Oh, Jar Jar is the best character," and I'm like, "Well," and no offense to Ahmed Best, but I just feel like his character isn't designed for people my age. Um, as I said, I loved him as a kid, and Ahmed Best's performance is so good. His line delivery and his acting is very well done. So good job to him. Um, but yeah, I just don't feel like his character is targeted towards me, and it doesn't land as well as it used to. But moving on from Jar Jar, um, you get to see Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan in action. You know what? I'm not gonna go in a chronological, like saying my thoughts on every scene. I'm gonna go by like characters and scenes I like. So Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, mostly just the action is what I want to talk about now. So the action is really good in this episode. Um, let's start with like the battle droids. On the Trade Federation ship and on Naboo. It's pretty short, but it makes a lot of sense. I feel like they put up more should have put up more of a fight against the destroyer droids. In the Clone Wars, they take them out all the time, but I guess now they're just like, oh well, we better just run. I mean, maybe if there had been, excuse me, maybe if there had been like 4 or 5 of them, that would have been pretty cool to see just that much blaster fire. Um, but it makes sense. They and the force speed. I feel like that power, force speed. Okay, so as they run away from the Star Destroyers, they move a lot faster than normal. And Jedi have this power called Force Augmentation, which is basically where they're stronger and faster than normal. I mean, it's never been confirmed in canon. I don't, not to my knowledge, anyways. But like Jedi jump really high, they move really fast, they can deflect blaster fire. They pretty much necessarily have to have Force Augmentation, either that or they just all happen to have super good genetics, which is unlikely. But anyways, they have this power called Force Augmentation, but Force Speed seems to be a different power that makes them even faster. Which, if that's true, then they should probably use that a lot more. So, I feel like sometimes Force powers aren't used when they should be, and that's because we don't, like, there's not really any cost to them. I mean, there's clearly a strain when using them. You can get tired. Oftentimes you're limited by your talent and your training. But there's not really any cost to them, so they aren't used as often as they could. For example, in say the inheritance cycle, it's very similar. You're limited mostly by your talent and your training, but there's also things like if you overexert yourself, you can kill yourself. In addition, you have to know specific words in a different language to cast your spell or use your magic or whatever. And going back to you kill yourself if you overexert yourself. If you cast a spell and you don't have the strength to do it, you can't stop doing the spell. You have to kill yourself basically. And there are ways around this. You can instead of saying like lift this rock, you can say lift this rock very slowly, and then you can and yeah, you basically use wording that allows you to stop, but you have to have a education in that language. You have to be careful with how hard you exert yourself. So there's very clear limits to that, and they show that through when the main character Aragon is getting trained. But in Star Wars, they don't really explain the costs or the limits. So, and I'm not sure there are any. At least Disney doesn't seem to have any, but George Lucas might. But I don't think there are any. I think it's just a cool magic system, and I'm fine with that. I love Star Wars anyways. I would prefer if they were more careful with that kind of thing, but it's totally fine. It's more about the story than the setting, at least for Star Wars. Even though the setting is totally awesome. Spaceships and lightsabers. Oh man, lightsabers are so cool. Speaking of lightsabers, Darth Maul has a double-bladed lightsaber, which is so cool, and I don't really have much more to say about it than that, but it's just a cool thing I thought I'd mention to bring us back to the Phantom Menace. So moving beyond the choreography and the fighting styles of Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, I also love their characters. Obi-Wan obviously gets more development in the Clone Wars and in Episode 2 and 3, of course. And he's played very well. He develops from this by-the-books kind of character and slowly develops his sense of humor. He learns to improvise and kind of bend the rules just a little bit. He's still by the books, but he's not so serious about it. He's more joking about it, which is so fun to see. Especially like his bickering with Anakin is very, I don't know, just fun. It's a fun time seeing them hang out together. But in this one, he's more serious, and that makes sense because his master is not very serious. And well, he is serious, but he's not. He's rebellious. He doesn't care as much about what the council thinks. He more cares about what the will of the Force is. And I feel like his character is very misunderstood. And I might eventually just do a whole episode on Qui-Gon and how I see his character. But what we see in The Phantom Menace and in Master and Apprentice makes him one of my favorite characters of all time. Um, like Yoda's up there with him, Get Fisto, and in fact, I made a whole video or a whole segment of a live stream. I don't remember which one it was, but you can look in the playlist in the description or click on my channel thing and go there and kind of see it. You'll see in the thumbnail, it's like the top 10 characters or something, and I list out a whole bunch of characters. And I don't know for sure if Qui-Gon is on there. He probably is, because my top 10 changes all the time. Um, so, yeah, just Qui-Gon is an excellent character, even though you don't see him that much in, or you don't, well, that's not even true. You don't see his full character in this movie because it's a movie. It's only 2 hours. You can't delve into characters quite as much as you can in like a book or a TV show. But even with just what we see, he's an awesome character. But another character who's awesome is Darth Maul, and in the Phantom Menace, he's really cool, but he's not that good of a character. He looks menacing. He shows up. He fights Qui-Gon. He hunts them down first, and then he fights Qui-Gon, and then he shows up later and takes on both of them with his double-bladed lightsaber, and this awesome fight with awesome choreography, and it's one of the best in the saga. And then he dies with basically no development. He's just a bad guy, which is totally fine. You can have just bad guys. But he's not that cool of a character until you get to the Clone Wars. And when you get to them, he's an awesome character. But I'm not going to go into all that in this live stream because I'm talking about specifically the Phantom Menace, and in that, he's just a cool looking character, and that's totally fine. But moving on, we've got Padme. And Padme's also a good character. I don't like her that much in this episode because she comes off almost like kind of like a Mary Sue, to be honest. She doesn't really come off that way, but there's just not that much there, and what there is usually like super impressive. Like she's the queen of a planet at what age 14 or something. She's good with a blaster. She's like, why would a queen need to be good with a blaster? She should have bodyguards for that, but no, we're gonna have Padme be good with the blaster. She has, like a secret identity, so she can be a handmaiden, and all this cool stuff. She gives speeches, and she's only 14, and that's the big thing is, why is she so talented? And I get it, it's for the story. If they made her any older than Anakin and her, it'd be really weird, which by the way, it already kind of is. In my opinion, if I could tweak one thing about the Phantom Menace, what I would probably tweak, and you know what, I should probably think about this, but one of the things I would definitely consider is moving Anakin's age up to like 16, and Padme can move up to like 17 or something. Just make them older so that the story just makes more sense. Like, I get that you kind of want to target kids because that's Star Wars' target audience is kids, but I feel like kids can empathize with older people too. Like as a kid, I empathize with Jar Jar, so, and he's older. But yeah, more seriously, you can empathize with other characters, even if they're not your age. So that's my thoughts on Anakin's age and Padme. What are some other characters in this? What? Okay, first of all, what is your favorite character? Taking only into account the Phantom Menace, and I mean you can take into account how that connects with the other, with the rest of the saga, but just characters from the Phantom Menace and most focusing on the Phantom Menace. What is your favorite character in all of that movie? And while you answer that, I'm gonna move on to my conclusion for this segment. The Phantom Menace it's not the worst episode. There's one that's far worse in my opinion. I don't think it's secretly brilliant. There are plenty of mistakes in this episode and plenty of things that could have done better. In fact, you could almost say that it's not really that necessary. like it's 10 years before Attack of the Clones. You could make Attack of the Clones the first one, and then have like one focusing on the Clone Wars, and then do episode 3, and maybe that would have been better. Like episode 1, other than like Duel of the Fates, it's not really that important to Star Wars. Um, the story is, but it's not a story that necessarily needed to be seen. Of Anakin coming out of slavery and becoming a Jedi. You could just say, or you could just hint during like Attack of the Clones and show during the Clone Wars, maybe to the Zygerian arc, for the Clone Wars. You could just hint at that he's been a slave in the past, and that will, in fact, that might give him a more understanding backstory if you don't see him as a tiny little kid. But then, of course, there's the whole thing that it's more of a tragedy if you see where Anakin came from and how he was such a good kid, and then he turns to the dark side and kills kids. But I'm going to move on from this segment and switch off to the next one, which is all about the Dark Troopers. How powerful are they? We see Mando fight one. We see Luke fight a whole bunch of them. More on that later. And we see Moff Gideon boasting about them. We see them flying down to get Grogu. But how powerful are they? Looking at all of that, what are their strengths and weaknesses? That sort of thing. So let's start with probably the most well-tested aspect of them, their durability. We see them fighting, and they get hit by several things. They don't get destroyed. You see the effects of those, but you also see their limits. You see them do get destroyed, and it's not like some massive Death Star laser. It's like you see them get destroyed by something relatively weak, something relatively strong, hitting in weak points, that sort of thing. So let's get into that. So first off, blaster fire. That's probably going to be your first go-to. In fact, even after fighting them, Mando doesn't tell, like when they're pounding at the door, Mando and, not Moff Gideon, Mando and Cara Dune and Bo-Katan and the other Mandalorians, they're standing there pointing blasters at the door as if when the Dark Troopers come through, they're going to be able to shoot them down. No, they're, like, the blaster fire basically just bounced off of them, which actually made me think they were Beskar for a bit. But I don't think they are any, well, more on that later. But anyways, oh, actually, hang on. I'm going to need to say that all again. Hang on. Okay. So basically, the Dark Troopers are super tough. They've got, like, armor that blaster fire just bounces off of them. They also have fireproof. Like, Mando shoots his flamethrower into them, and it just goes throughout their, like, wiring and then comes out, and they're completely unaffected by that. Another of Mando's tricks is his grapple line, which is a good thing he didn't try that because they are also incredibly strong. So they're just throwing them around. So they're extremely tough to blunt force attacks, to sharp attacks, even to extreme heat. But two things that do destroy them is one, and this is the first one we see, a Beskar spear stabbing them through the neck. I'm guessing that if the spear had hit like their shoulders, it would have just bounced off, or if it hit like their stomach, but basically anywhere they had plating, it would probably just bounce off. But it hit them in the neck where there's a whole bunch of wires, and it just took it out immediately. Another thing is a lightsaber strike from Luke Skywalker, and I think the from Luke Skywalker part is important because we know that Luke Skywalker is incredibly strong. I feel like I'd have to rewatch the scene. In fact, I think I'm going to do that right now while I talk. But a weaker force or lightsaber duelist might not be able to cut through them as easily. And sure, they might be able to do it, but they might not be able to do it. So, but another aspect of the Dark Troopers is their incredible strength. Like, they're just throwing around Mando like nothing. And another thing is they're punching through blast doors. I'm sure Qui-Gon would have made it through the blast doors eventually, but it would have taken a lightsaber a long time. And the Dark Troopers were just punching through it. Sure, it would have taken them a very long time. But it would have happened. So I'm rewatching the scene where Luke takes out Dark Troopers. And yeah, he appears to be breaking them pretty easily with his lightsaber. But then again, he is like slicing pretty hard. So like, yeah. I feel like, say, someone like Ahsoka Tano, who's more of a fast fighter rather than a strong fighter, could slash through them, but it might take her a second hit if she hits the shoulder pads. So my first thought, which I got from when Mando shot his blaster at them and it just bounced off, is, oh, they must be made of Beskar. If they're made of Beskar, it's a very diluted alloy. So lightsabers seem to be very effective against them, unlike against a Beskar. Unlike Beskar armor. So, as for their offensive output, other than their strength, their blasters actually seem to be very powerful. But there's not much. They've never like shot anything that a normal blaster wouldn't be able to penetrate, and it blew it up or something. They didn't shoot something that they didn't shoot like a stormtrooper, and it just didn't injure them at all. So Dark Troopers are probably about average for blasters. But as for speed, they seem about as quick as a normal human in terms of their movements, or I should say their movements are faster. But the difference is their movement, they don't like move as smoothly, so it ends up actually taking the same amount of time for them to complete all the different actions. But another point in their favor for speed is that they can fly. It's not like a slow hover. It's like a Iron Man style fly really fast type deal. So Dark Troopers are absolutely incredibly powerful. They're super tough, and I'm very impressed by their toughness. Their strength is incredible as well. They can just throw people around like crazy. And their speed is also reasonably impressive. So I'd say they're comparing them to some other characters. I would say a couple Dark Troopers could probably take on most like Jedi Padawans. So if they had them during the Purge, they could probably use them pretty effectively. Like say Cal Kestis could probably escape, but or yeah, maybe he could. Here's a question for you to respond to in the chat. Do you think Cal Kestis could survive against 3 Dark Troopers in like say a hallway, like where Luke was fighting them, just in a normal hallway? And how do you think Ezra Bridger would do against 2 of them, let's say? Or maybe even more. Do you think, like, how many do you think Ezra could take down? But I would say Dark Troopers aren't quite as powerful as most Jedi. But they are, if there was enough of them, I feel like they could take on a bunch of Jedi, other than like the high level ones, like obviously Luke could take on several of them. Most Jedi Council members could. Probably a bunch of Jedi Masters, but Jedi Knights is kind of where it's like, well, could they take on several of them? It probably depends on the Jedi, right? So, in terms of other bounty hunters, I think Dark Troopers, well, they're definitely more powerful than like IG units, which puts them ahead of most bounty hunters, to be honest. Boba Fett might not even be able to take on one. He'd probably find a way to kill it, but Mando barely could, and that's only because he had a Beskar spear. I guess now he has the Darksaber, so now he could maybe take on 2, or I don't know. Maybe they'd just shoot him down, but they're more powerful than most bounty hunters, not as powerful as most Jedi, and that's my verdict. So moving on to the last segment of this video, other than just answering any chats that you guys have, or discussing topics you're interested in. What is your favorite hallway scene? And none of you have chatted, so I'm just gonna say mine. My favorite hallway scene Actually, I need to think about this. Let me describe them. So, Darth Vader's hallway scene is the first one we see, and it's where we get the name hallway scene. Because his is really a hallway scene. It's like Darth Vader and a bunch of rebels on either side of a hallway, and Darth Vader just takes them all out. And it's so epic. Like the red fog or the fog is just his breathing. Then he ignites his lightsaber, and boom, you see Darth Vader ignited in red fog everywhere. And then you just see the rebels' terrified faces as they're like, "Open fire!" and they shoot at him, and it's just totally awesome. It's epic. It's exactly the kind of thing that, um, it's basically fan service, but it's awesome. um, then you have another hallway scene, and that is in Jedi Fallen Order. And immediately I'm like, yeah, this one isn't my favorite. It's basically Jaro Tapal. He's Cal Kestis' master. He's a Lasat, same species as Zeb from Rebels. And he's just killing a bunch of storm or clone troopers. It wasn't that cool. It wasn't very tense. At least it didn't seem tense for me. But I don't know. I guess some people liked it. So I definitely like Vader's better. But then another one is Maul's hallway scene. And this is where it starts to be like, well, are they really paying homage to Vader's hallway scene? Or are they just having a bad guy fighting people in a hallway? Um, but it's classified as a hallway scene by most fans. So I'm going to include it in this list. And the interesting thing, in fact, there's a great video about this. I believe it's from Full Fat Videos. Let me fact check that. Full Fat Videos, though, even if this isn't one of their videos, they have a lot of great Star Wars videos. But what was I talking? Right, the hallway scenes. Yes. No, it's not Full Fat Videos. Well, sorry for the distraction. The interesting thing that was said in that video is that the reason that the hallway scene is so effective is because it's showing this lightsaber, the like iconic weapon of the Jedi. It's showing what it's like when you're facing that for the rebel trooper, and it's absolutely terrifying. Which obviously makes sense, and that's why it's so terrifying to watch, and that's what makes it so epic. But then when you watch the Vader hallway scene, okay, so by the way, this video that I'm discussing and getting these ideas from is by a channel called Lore Star, I believe. And it's called Why the Hallway Scene is Deeper Than You Think, Star Wars Explained. So that was a great video. I absolutely love that one. But anyways, so Vader uses his lightsaber against non-lightsaber, and it's showing us what it's like to fight a Jedi, basically. Then you watch the Maul one, and Maul is without his lightsaber, and that's just like this little twist that is kind of showing, even if a Force user doesn't have their lightsaber, it's still this epic, deadly hallway scene. So as for which one is better between those two, Vader's is shorter and more epic, but I do like the creativity shown in Maul's with him like throwing the metal panels. At the very end, I love this. He force pulls the clone trooper's arm through the door and gets it chopped off so that he can have the comm that's attached to the clone trooper's helmets. That's just awesome. I love things like that. But Vader's, I'm just gonna have to go with Vader's. I do love the Maul scene, but Vader's is more iconic. Maul's is just it's just a cool scene, but Vader's is a cool hallway scene. So for that reason, I'm gonna say it's the better hallway scene. But the last one and the most recent one is Luke's hallway scene from The Mandalorian. And this is kind of a stretch to be a hallway scene, to be honest. I mean, it's several scenes put together, and some of them are in a hallway, and he's taking on not stormtroopers, but it's kind of close. I think the reason that it's called a hallway scene is because he fights similarly to Vader, because obviously what else is he gonna do? Copy Obi-Wan's fighting style from Episode 4? I'm guessing the one of the only fights he's been in, or not. That's not true. One of the only lightsaber duelists he's seen in combat several times is Darth Vader, so he's gonna pick up a lot on that. And also, he just has the physicality for a Form 5. So Yoda probably taught him a bunch of Form 5. But so regardless of the reason, Luke fights a lot like Vader, which makes it pretty similar. And again, I'm gonna have to go with Vader for my favorite hallway scene. I do like the Luke scene better. In fact, yesterday, like last night, I was commenting on this exact question: Vader's versus Luke. Not what's your favorite hallway scene, but Vader versus Luke on another great channel. Wow, I'm full of recommendations today. It's called Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast, and you should definitely go check them out. They've got great videos. It's two fans from two generations, and they just talk Star Wars, and you can engage in the chat. It's great. But anyways, I was commenting on this question: what scene is better, Vader's hallway scene or Luke's hallway scene? And I went with Luke's, because Vader's hallway scene is great. It's short and it's epic and it's just terrifyingly awesome. But Luke's is longer. It's got better choreography, and in my opinion, it kind of shows more of his character and his physicality. But another big thing is that it impacts the story more. And when I'm judging a hallway scene, or when I look at those two scenes next to each other, I'm like, well, Luke's scene is obviously the better scene, but Vader's scene is like, it's the definition of a hallway scene. It's meant to be, you're meant to judge it for its epicness, for its terrifyingness, for its just ability to show this monster coming down a hallway and just destroying all the like random unnamed soldiers, which Luke's does very well, but it does it differently. It doesn't do it with this epicness. It does this with this mysteriousness. Because the Mandalorian, the character is supposed you're looking at Luke through the eyes of the Mandalorian, whereas in Rogue One you're looking at him through the eyes of the rebels being slaughtered. So, and I think that's the big reason why I think Vader's scene is the better hallway scene, in my opinion. It's because the focus isn't on like some third party just watching. The focus is on those people getting beat up. And even in the mall scene, or I should say in the Jedi Fallen Order scene, the focus is on Cal looking at his master. Or I should say the perspective is from Cal. And then in the Maul's hallway scene, you could say that the perspective is the clones, but I would think it's more accurate to say the perspective is actually Maul rather than the clones. So you don't feel that terror, you just are that terror. You feel the rage that he's using to inflict that terror. So I would say Darth Vader's hallway scene is the best hallway scene. I guess it's right there from the beginning. I guess I've been accidentally foreshadowing it the entire time. But with that, what's your favorite hallway scene? Leave that in the chat. Leave that in the comments. Send me an email. Just whatever. Leave your thoughts somewhere with what is your favorite hallway scene. So with that, I think that's all I have planned for this stream. If you want, you can leave a question in the chat and I could talk about that. I love talking Star Wars, so just leave something in the chat, or even if you're watching not live, leave a comment and I'll comment back, or maybe even address it on the show. Real quick, one more time I want to mention the question of the stream is, who is the Viceroy of the Trade Federation? But with that being said, may the Force be with you. Always. Oh boy. I just noticed that the chat was going on all the time. And Noah was here. It's hanging great. Happy 2021. Yes, Jar Jar was not that bad. Something was funny. Yes, Darth Maul is cool. in the Phantom Menace. Yeah, so basically I missed a bunch of chats. Um, so I'm just finally getting to the theirs. And yes, Jeremiah, you got it right. Newt Gunray is the Viceroy of the Trade Federation, and you get the first 10 points. Um, so I guess now I've gotten to all the chats. Why does this not work? I hate that this chat did not work. I'm very sorry, guys. But I guess with that being said, may the force be with you again. See you next week.